Hello guys, can you hear me properly? If you are, please let me know in the chat box quickly because I just you know edit our settings and I just want to confirm if you can hear me. Right. So quickly write in the chat box if you can hear me properly. Okay. And then we'll start immediately. So I hope you all are doing fine, and today we are going to start our session on the age of Milton and the period of the Civil War. So before that, I just want to mention that what we have studied so far, we started with our Greco-Roman, remember? Greco-Roman, we almost solved like 40 plus questions, and from that most of the time you get two questions from that. Sometime it will be directly or indirectly. So two questions you can expect from Greco-Roman, and then we have Old English period, and in that period we don't get much of the questions. Sometimes they ask about the form and style, that these kind of forms like alliteration, caesura, all this stuff. So you can just kind of expect one questions. And then we have Middle English. In Middle English we talked about Chaucer, and definitely they ask one or sometime two questions in that. So even if you take one, so we have covered four questions there. And then we talked about Chaucer, and we talked about his contemporary. So altogether one question you get. So we have like two, three, four, and five questions from there. And then we have Shakespearean, and in that Shakespearean or Elizabethan, we usually get two questions from Shakespeare, one from university wits, and a couple of more questions. You might get one from Ben Jonson and one from Marlowe. So altogether you get five questions from that period itself. So 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10. Total 10 questions we have already discussed that you will definitely get. And in the Jacobean period, you have like one question, actually two questions, because one they ask in match the following and one in order, chronology order, and sometime they ask direct question as well. So you can just think three questions from Jacobian. So we have total 13 questions discussed, and we also talked about prose and other stuff that you may consider they might ask. So altogether we have covered our 15 questions, and today we are going to talk about Milton, where you can add two more questions. They ask one question directly, mostly chronology order, or match the following, one option on Milton, and one direct question that you will get, and one indirect. So basically you get three questions, but we have put two for you know to, so you can understand we have now will have 17 question plus. We have already, you're in that far category, and if you have attended all your classes, whatever the session we have taken, then you can just expect that 17 questions you will definitely get till now. Okay, so let's don't waste any more time and we'll jump into the age of Milton. I hope you all are excited because there are so many things that you would learn. Also, you will learn some codes to remember Milton, and you are going to see at least 16 questions, PYQ questions from Milton itself, and all other about in a criticism on Milton or critical analysis on Milton. All these things we'll talk about. We'll also talk about all the plots and the works. Very important. Little bit about his life also, because they used to ask questions on his life, but these days they don't ask. They're asking mostly about the prose factor of his literary career, and they ask one question from poem itself. So, and one in criticism, like not from him, but other critic, what they said about him and all these stuff. So good afternoon, Vasu. You're already there, and that's really good. We'll just begin quickly and start our session. So anyway, that's all what we have discussed. And before that, we have also discussed all kinds of code to remember all these, to bag all these 16 to 15 questions, right? So here, first on the age of Milton, I'm gonna talk about the historical backgrounds. When we talk about, Milton, we should know that it was all this age was dominated by what? Civil war. And very important is that it the era is called the Caroline era. Remember the date, 1625 to 1649. So that's all we are going to cover today, and the later in the session, maybe tomorrow, we'll discuss Cavalier, and we'll discuss metaphysics. All these we'll discuss in next class, and also the prose, whoever the prose writer was at that time. But anyway, some of the prose Milton has written himself, like all the tracts we have, all the, about divorce, about reformation, education, and then Aeropagitica, all this stuff that he has written, that we'll talk about in this session itself. So let me tell you, when you talk about Milton, you should know one thing, that you can easily remember the order of his work. It's very easy to remember. And how you can remember? Like our formula, right? The first or the earlier, remember? Then we have middle period, whatever is in there in the middle, and our last one, whatever is in the last. Through that, you can remember all the order of his work. So basically, Milton's life is also divided into three parts. The first, basically, he wrote what? Mostly poems, small poems, and in the middle period, he wrote what? All the prose items. So, and in the last period, what he has written is all his greatest poem, like Paradise Lost. He has written Regain. Also, he has written Samson Agnostic. All these stuff in the last period. So you can understand, when there is a order, you would definitely know if they have mentioned Paradise Lost, it must be falling around at the end. And if they're asking about some sonnets, so you can think in the middle. He has written some sonnets in the middle as well. But prose, basically what he has written, a lot of prose there. And we'll talk about all the prose, also very important in your exam perspective, because they're always asking questions from that. So that was all about his period anyway. Now the development of literature, what happened at that time? After Elizabethan period, drama kind of gone. There was not enough, dramatic works that they published or performed. And also there was, you know, theater got closed at that time also. So theater was closed. So that was another reason that we don't have much plays. Suppose if theater was open, then Milton might have written some of the drama also, and you would be reading his or preparing his drama as well, right? So this not happened in that time, so we don't have much drama, but we have closet drama. Closet drama is simple, it can be written, and it usually published in some of the publication of the poem or any tract. So that you have to remember, at that time only closet drama was there. And some historical pressure was there, like there was civil war, so most of the work was always political. So if there is civil war, main reason could be these Puritans and these Protestant and Catholic. So most of the work would be kind of based on this, and that we'll explore later in this session itself. So anyway, the dominance of Milton. So this whole period, it is not too much, as you know, 25 to we have like 60, somewhere around 35 years of very small amount of, you know, years are there. If you are just considering 100 years, then 35 is quite less for you, right? So in 35 years, who dominated most? Our Milton. And in that period we have metaphysical period, but it started before, like in Jacobean. We started with who done. So he was, all these metaphysical poets were actually modeled on Donne's poetry and the style of his metaphysics use, right? And all these conceit and metaphor and all these personification they used in metaphysical. Then we have Cavalier poets, and you remember the quote that we have made in our last session about Cavalier, like loyal, it was there, right? Loyal Cavalier means loyal to the king. Loyal Cavaliers care well to sick lovers. Remember that? That was the code. So loyal means these who are loyal, called cavaliers, loyal to the king's cavalier. We have Carew, then we have what? Well, we have Marvel, and then we have uh, Marvel Lab. We have Sick Suckling and the Lovelace, through Lovelace. So that you will understand, right? And then we have the expansion of prose at that time, all these tracts about politics, about, you know, education, about books, right, and about divorce. All these tracts were happening, so they are basically falls under the category of non-fiction or the prose. So that was happened. And again, the collapse of drama. So in that civil war period, there was not kind of, you know, enough drama at that time. There were theater were closed in 1642. So it was actually the peak time of our Milton. So at that time what happened, the theater closed, so he didn't write any kind of drama that you would see in his bibliography. So what you can do is, you can remember that he has written some drama, but that was kind of, it could be read, not to perform. So these were the closet drama. So that all happened in at that time. And let me tell you about the literary form before we jump into the life of our John Milton, our bard. But before that, we're going to talk about what kind of literary forms it is started. So the lyric, when it comes to this part, you should understand that the most of these metaphysical poems were kind of in, lyrical in the format. Mostly, as you know, Andrew Marvell is there, and we have Korosha and Vaughan, and we have Milton's lyric as well, and some of the Milton's sonnet, like one is on Shakespeare, as you know. They have asked a recent question based on that, and then we have on his blindness. Most of the time you get question on his this particular sonnet. So there were two famous sonnets that you should remember in your exam perspective. Anyway, let me tell you more about the epic. So again, epic kind of found its trend at that time, and we have a couple of epic, like Milton's Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained is not actually fall under the category of epic, but it falls under the category of brief epic. Very important. It's some of the, critics in modern era said about the Paradise Regained that it is a brief epic. Very important that you should remember. Anyway, so the epic, as you know, we have our Milton Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. Both of these you can see here. Anyway, and then we have some of the odes. So late Spenserian poem like Epithalaminian, Protagonia, all these uses what? Irregular odes. So when this word odes comes, you should remember that in Milton's era or Milton's age, we have Cowley who uses Pindoric odes. They have asked question based on that itself, numerous time, if you would just ask me. Anyway, Pindaric odes little bit grown more, grown a little bit more, and most of the poets started using that pindaric odes. Then we have mostly, like, there was no drama, right, but there was narrative poetry in the form of this these drama in the form of these narrative poetry. So we have El Allegro, we have El Penseroso, we have Herrick's pastoral, Crossa's religious poem, and Denham's Cooper's Hill. All these started in the descriptive drama. As you know, not much of the drama, but some of the late Jacobean playwright was there who used like Messengers and the Webster, Turner, Ford. These two are there, Ford and Sale, also the Lady of Pleasure, that you should actually have an idea about it. But anyway, what you know kind of was trending in the age of Milton is the prose. So mostly it was sermons, it was philosophical work, like you could see in Thomas Brown, Hobbes, and Hales. These two works are very important by Hobbes and Broll. Hobbes, Leviathan, and Brownie, the Religio Medici, all this stuff. Right, that anyway we'll talk about in our prose section later in the session. Right, I will talk. Then historical works are also, kind of making way into this particular period, and miscellaneous prose were also there, like Isaac Walton's Complete Angler. There was a question based on that as well. So anyway, now it's time for us to jump into John Milton's what early career, early life, and all about him. Whatever they have asked in your exam, everything is there in our session right now. Anyway, we'll start with the life and career. So till now, if it is clear, write in the chat box clear quickly. Then we'll move to our next. Okay, Vasu is there, and who else are there? Two more person are there, and if you're just listening to this particular session, you can just say clear in the chat box. Then we'll quickly start our Milton. Okay, so let me tell you about his life first, and along with it, career. Everything is there in all these points that I have mentioned, that they have whatever they have asked in your exams. So pay more attention. As you know, Milton was born in London, right? Educated in St. Paul's School, Cambridge. Milton kind of knew at least 10 language and was widely read. Good. And his knowledge spanned literature, history, theology, philosophy, natural science. So the guy is a kind of very learned man. He knew what he was doing, right? And Milton's Commonplace book contains notes from his extensive reading. The British Library now holds Milton's Commonplace book. Anyway, he lived during what English Civil Wars. That's why we have so many tracts, so many pamphlet, all these stuff. And he, as you know, is celebrated as political controversialist also. And most of Milton's prose were written during the middle period of his life. Middle period, remember, 40 to 42. Most of what his prose, right, his prose was written in this time. As I told you, we have three parts, right? Earlier, and then later, and in the middle. Middle mostly is dominated by the prose, right? So he wrote on stamping out corruption among clergy, which is called reformation, and then advocate for freedom to the press, Areopagitica. We all knew all these questions they ask in your exam. And another important event happened that actually changed the way he thinks about the world. And you know he got married in 43, but very younger woman. And then what happened is she left him, and he was kind of heartbroken, and that could be seen in his work, that we have the work, the doctrine and discipline of divorce. Remember the date, 43, the same time when he got married and the girl left him, right? And Very important, iconoclastic. It was the support from our Charles the king execution. And you remember we have iconoblast, something like that. That very important. This iconoclastic Milton has written to support Charles. So Milton wrote many works aimed to international audience as well. And then in his later career, what happened, he has written Paradise Lost, Regained, and we have kind of that actually what cement Milton's reputation as a great poet. Milton advocated for abolishing of the Church of England, very important, and he supported the execution of. Actually, he supported the execution Charles the First in his prose work. Right, and his influence extended to the American and French Revolution. So his influence can be seen in both the revolution in America and France, right? And France. Anyway, Milton valued liberty of conscience and religious tolerance. All these things, actually, I'm telling you to build your, kind of set up the mood, to great thing comes in your way and whatever the exam requires for you. Anyway, very important that you should know that Macaulay wrote an essay on Milton in 1859. Very important, they recently asked question based on this particular. There was matched the following, and they all these names and the other races who wrote what, right? Okay, and one more thing, in the metaphysical essay, poets actually contrast the poetry of French writer Racine and Baudelaire with John Milton and John Dryden. Very important, this comparison in Metaphysical Poets by T.S. Eliot is quite important for you. Arnold also said about his study of poetry. Remember, we talked about in our first couple of sessions that about study of poetry, that what he is actually meant by seriousness. So what he said, how he classified it, like Chaucer does not have high seriousness, but Homer, Shakespeare, Milton and many others had, right? So that is also very important. And one of the important things that you would consider, and you might, when you read about Milton, you'll get that Miltonic verse, also known as Miltonic blank verse or Miltonic epic. So these kind of terms you get when you talk about Milton's work. Okay, and that is actually famous from this blank verse in Paradise Lost. Okay, now let me tell you about an essay on man, right? Is a poem by Pope. And why this particular poem is mentioned here in Milton's section, because listen, just think about this line. Vindicate the ways of God to man. A variation of John Milton's what opening line justifies the ways of God to man. So the opposite. So through that you can easily understand why we have mentioned his work here. Anyway, poetry and drama, as I told you, now it's time for us to remember things. As I told you before, we have earlier life, remember, and then we have middle, and then we have later. We always divide works in these kind of stuff to remember things. Like first period, what usually happened at that time, that he has written some couple of minor poems and also a couple of tracts, but mostly in the middle period we have found one sonnet, one or two sonnets at that time, and mostly prose all these tracts like aeropagitica we have, on education we have, and we have on reformation. All these things were written in middle period. Later period we have Paradise Lost, and then Regain, and then Samson Agnostic. So this order you have to remember. Earlier work is like the first one you should remember, Christ Nativity. So as we know, first one Christ, right? And we will just immediately go at the end, what is, we can just put Samson agnostic, right? So this we can. Ah. Last Samson. That you have to remember. Then we have regained, paradise regained, and then we have paradise lost. It is from here, and on here we have one address that I have for the code. So remember this address and you will know the order of all earlier poems. Like we have Christ Shakespeare 23 Lane, Castle of Commodus. So this address, if you remember, you'll be easily to track all his work in one small sentence. So Christ is our first work on Shakespeare, remember, and then we have what, 23 Lane, remember, and then we have Lane represent our El Allegro, and then we have El Allegro, then we have Il Penseroso, right, and we have Camus, closet drama, and we have what? Last one is Lycidas. Lycidas. But this address means you know all of his earlier work. Now it's time for us to remember the middle period. In the middle period, we have the code for you: reform, educational, books on, for, yeah, on or for, you can just put kings. So this middle period you will remember through what? Here. Of reform, of education, and iconoclastus, right? So that your middle period is clear. Now we have the last period. In the last period we have the simple code for it, as you can see here. So blind Milton, our blind Milton, wrote Paradise Lost and regained with Samson. So that is your last one. So all remember. So I hope you know complete order of Milton's work. Okay, comment box. The order is clear now. Remember, earlier, later, middle, then we have first, last, second last, then we have second, and then in middle all the prose. Prose, what prose? We have the code that I have given. So you would easily able to remember this. Okay, let me know in the chat box if the chronology order of his work is clear for you. Then we'll quickly move to his works. Okay, clear. Nice. Now we can just move to early poems of Milton Shakespeare. Before like 7-8 years ago, they used to ask this question most of the time. Ode on the morning of Christ's nativity. Very important. And on arriving at the age of 23, right? And then we have at Harton, he wrote El Allegro, Il Penseroso. So all about his early poems. For that we have the code that all this Christ. Remember that Christ, Shakespeare, Lane, 23 Lane, 23 Lane, and then all the things. Right. Here we have Castle of Camus. Remember that. Commodus. So this was all poem, that earlier poem you can remember. Then we have mature poetry. In mature poetry we have all these things on his blindness, Paradise Lost, And then we have remember one thing, there was a question. First, in Paradise Lost we had 10 books, right? Then in the letter later we have 12 books, the next publication, and it was all written in blank verse. Anyway, I'll just move quickly to the Paradise Lost, then you will understand everything. So here all you have to remember all these things that I have said right now. Anyway, later works, as you know, we have Paradise Regained, Samson Agnostic, Paradise Lost, Paradise Regained. Then we have Paradise Regained is a briefer, poorer than its predecessor. Okay. So anyway, we have again for complete, slide or page for the particular work, whatever the work we are discussing right now. For that, we'll move later. But first, we'll talk about El Allegro and what kind of question they ask in your exam also. So it means what? The happy man. And remember, pastoral poem. They have asked question very recent about like which one of the poem is pastoral poem by Milton, and the answer is El Allegro, pastoral poem, 1645. And it is often paired with both. So together you have to remember both the poem El Allegro and El Penseroso. It is about a spend day, joyful day. One day it is all about, and it is uncertain. El Allegro was composed likely after Milton left Cambridge. Not important for you to remember, but you should have an idea that where he has written. So the poem was first published in Poems of John Milton's full set that they have first published here. Okay, so El Allegro serves as a balance of Milton's Latin poem in the collection. It is written in tetrameter couplet, creates a flowing, joyful rhythm. Okay, so that is about El Allegro, and that's the question you get. What you get mostly together: the happy man, the pastoral poem. That's all you get, and the iambic tetrameter that it was written. Next is El Penseroso. That means the thinker. Melancholic man. It is about a melancholic man. Remember, it was first published same in what? 1645 and 46 publication. And the speaker what? Invokes divinest melancholy. The poem reject what? Vain deluding joys. So in other it was about joyful day, right? And it is complete deluding joys. So through that keyword you will know what. Again, it is also written in iambic tetrameter, and allegro means what? Is melancholy and all these things, right? So that is all about Penseroso that you have to remember. Very important, Camus. You get question from that. You should know that is a masque. It is a masque written by John Milton, and it was performed in Ludovo Castle by John. Both the points are important. And Milton masque honors chastity, contrasting rivalry with virtue. And the lady character represent private heroism and virtue. So what happens? Camus, who is what? Evil sorcerer, represent hedonism and pleasure. And Camus is the son of Bacchus and Circe, figure from mythology. And the lady is imprisoned by Camus' magic. In his place, the lady defends temperance and chastity in a debate with Camus. She is then rescued by her brothers with the help of attendant spirit Sabrina. All these characters you don't have to remember that there was an evil sorcerer who captured what? These figures, and what happens? They come to rescue all these things. So through that small plot, if you can create, it will be easy for you to remember. Anyway, Lycidas, very important. They ask question, what? Tell me the name of poem by Milton which is elegy or elegy. What is it? It is your Lycidas. Very important. It was included in the volume of elegies published in 1638. So the elegy commemorate Edward King's Milton fronts. All this is important. All first 3 points are important. Again, it is also a pastoral elegy. Maybe they'll ask not the pastoral poem, but they might ask pastoral elegy, right? So for that you have to remember this. Then there was a question on this Virgil's. So this Lycidas represent Virgil's eclogue represent king. So that question was also there. And Milton muses on fame, the meaning of existence and divine judgment. And the speaker laments the massive task of memorializing what his friend. And the speaker asks mythology figure, where were you nymphs? So that line is also important. And couple of questions that you might get about with the belief is reborn in heaven. And the hopeful closing line, tomorrow to fresh woods and pastures new. And then we have epitaphemium demonis. They ask question, used to ask, not right now. I didn't find any question from the past 6 to 7 years, even 8 years. I didn't find the questions on this, but before. Demonis is Milton's lament for his friend Charles Diodati. Very important. And the poem is indebted to Theocritus, Virgil, and Ovid, as well as Neo Latin poets. Remember, it's a pastoral form with the most intimate what? A Renaissance tone. Okay. And the poem weds Christian sensibility to a classical pastoral form, reflecting Renaissance influence. Then, very important work is education. Right? They ask actually question based on that. They used to ask. Right now, they ask following all these tracts. Like sometimes they'll ask of studies, who has written, of education. These all in match the following. These kinds of question you are getting. So anyway, it remember the date 1645. As I told you, 1642 to 1648 or 49. This middle period is what all dominated by prose. Okay, so that you have to remember the correct chronology order of Milton's work. Anyway, Milton's another track is about divorce tracks. As I told you, he got married in 43, then the girl left, and he wrote the reaction about the divorce. That you have to remember. Anyway, Milton's divorce tract argue for the legitimacy of divorce on grounds of spousal incompatibility, and the tracts include what? The doctrine and discipline of divorce. So that you have to remember only that it was written by Milton and the date as well. Then we have very important Areopagitica, and that they ask like most of the time. And as you know, after 1 year, so 1643, now we have reached to 1644, which is about, this is divorce, right? And this is about books or the right stuff. So Areopagitica or Pegatica is 1644 prose polemic by John Milton. Very important that you should know that it is a freedom of speech and expression. So, what it has influenced a modern justification of free speech. The title means what? Athens, Areopagus, and Milton argument is rooted in Greek models. So he opposes what? Licensing, comparing it to the papa's tyranny, right? Papacy. Anyway, free circulation is essential for moral development. He argues that truth will ultimately prevail over falsehood. So, despite Areopagitica efforts, licensing law is not replaced for 50. All of these things we have to know, but these days they are asking who has written Areopagitica. right, and what it is about. So this remains a cornerstone in the literature of human rights. And again, constructive criticism is there, false flattery is there, and he encourages what parliament to follow the voice of reason. Milton supported previous law requiring printer's name on the books, and he argues that these works can be destroyed after the it gets over the copyright, and the fire and the executioner will be timeless remedy for dangerous books. So Milton seeks to hold authors and publishers accountable for harmful work. Very important, this quote, I mean not tolerate popery. And Paradise Lost. Now we'll talk about our Paradise Lost. In Lost, they mostly talk about book 9, and they also talk about these is book 11 because of Indian, you know, kind of culture is mentioned there. Culture, geographical textures is mentioned, like there is a river, there is mountain, there is Mughal, all these stuff are mentioned here. So book 11 they have started asking it. So first you should remember the date 1667, very important. The first publication had 10 books, very important. Remember, it has over 10,000 lines. Second edition was in 1674, which has 12 books. You can add two more books. These are very important because they are keep asking question in the manner of Virgil Aeneid. So that was very recent question that they have asked about Paradise Lost with the Virgil's Aeneid model. And remember, it's a masterpiece of, and the poem is what is a kind of biblical story of the fall of man, like Eve by the fallen angel, Satan, and their expulsion from the Garden of Eden. Then we have the these 12 books structure, and that we'll quickly talk about when we talk about the synopsis of each and every book. Anyway, the subject matter is what? Very important. The theme is Christian. Main character like before in paradise, later also, like God, Lucifer, Adam, and Eve. All these four characters are important, but basically they mostly ask about some other kind of angels, and that we'll talk about anyway. Remember, Blake and Shelley actually, saw Satan as the real hero of the poem. So your Satan was a hero in Paradise Lost. And many other works of art have been inspired by Paradise Lost. Notably, some works are there. The Creation, 1798, and John Keats' long poem, Endymion. Very important. And Milton, Peace, Paradise Regained with Samson agnostic. Very important that you should know. It is also represent Christ's temptation. And one of another important that they ask question about Darkness Visible. Actually a novel by modern writer Golding, and that title is actually from the Paradise Lost. So these connection, these kind of questions you get in your exam. Anyway, let me tell you about the plot. First I'll tell you the plot, and then I'll tell you the every kind of all book summary one by one. So we'll start with the plot summary here. As you can see over your screen, the poem begins in the media res, Satan, right, and with his fallen angel. They are all banished to hell, and they are doing meetings in Pandemonium, which is a kind of hell, city of hell. Satan recognizes followers using his rhetorical skill. And Mammon, the other fallen angels are there: Mammon, Beelzebub, Belial, and Moloch. These all name that you should know. They all join Satan to debate about the next move. Then Satan volunteer what? To go to earth and see that God's creation, and then his plan is to corrupt that creation, which is of course, are mankind, right? And Satan braves the abyss, remember, similar to Odysseus and Aeneas, and enters the newly created world. In the poem, the angelical war over heaven is recounted multiple times, so kind of flashbacks are happening there, and Satan's rebellion mirrors an epic battle and the war lasting 3 days between angels. And the god of sun defeats the rebellion, an angel, and what happens? They are banished from heaven and they are sent back to hell. And after the rebellion, what happened? God creates the world where they put Adam and Eve. And this couple, Adam and Eve, granted total freedom there. Whatever you wanna do, you do, but you're not supposed to eat tree of knowledge, right? But if you have blessed with total freedom, what will happen? They will eventually go and eat that fruit. But anyway, the story goes on, and Adam and Eve's temptation represent domestic epic, and Satan disguised as serpent tempts Eve, preying on her vanity and using her rhetoric. So after Eve eats that fruit, Adam knowingly commits the same sin out of love. And Milton portrays Adam as heroic figure and a greater sinner than Eve. Right, after eating the fruit, Adam and Eve experience all these kind of sin like lust, guilt, shame, and they realize their sin and engage in mutual recrimination, blaming each other. Another kind of sin here is committed, and Satan returns to hell, like with win or with triumphant, believing they now have dominion over paradise. However, Satan and his followers are punished, transforming into snakes, all of them. Eve appeals to Adam for reconciliation and they seek God's forgiveness together. They bow, before the God, and Adam, in a vision of Archangel Michael, mankind future of Adam is troubled by vision of mankind suffering and fall for grace. So Michael offers hope, telling Adam about mankind's redemption, that there one guy will come whose name will be Jesus Christ, and you all will be get your salvation. So Adam and Eve are cast out of Eden, beginning their new life outside the garden, right? And Michael, what tells Adam a paradise within thee, happier far, symbolizing inner peace. Adam and Eve now have a distant relationship with God, who is omnipresent but invisible now. And the poem, as you know, portrayed what? The fall of mankind, and this will be get redemption by who? Jesus Christ. Satan journey from hell to earth mirrors what? Classical epics, while Adam and Eve's story reflect personal conflict. So that is all about the summary altogether, but you should know what happened in a book, and for that I have summary for each work. So first of the thing happens in one book, that Milton starts his poem, right, and he introduces his epic with a story of man's fall, Satan rebellion. Satan, and as you know, they were kind of fallen from the heaven and they are put to hell, and there kind of they do all the meetings in pandemonium, and couple of you know fallen angel join Milton, and then join Satan, and then they decide to go to heaven. Who? Our Satan there. So very important is the first line that you should know. Of men's first disobedience and the fruit of the forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, and all our woes with loss of Eden, till one greater man to restore us and regain the blissful seat, sing heavenly muse that on the secret top of Oreb or Sinai did us inspire that shepherd who first taught the chosen seed in the beginning how the heavens and earth rose out of the chaos on hill delight the Loa broke that flawed fast by the oracle of God. I thence invoke thy aid to my adventurous song, that with no middle flight intends to soar above the Ionian mount, while it pursues things unattempted, yet in prose of rhyme. So remember everything in this stanza, you have to remember. They have been asking in the middle of, they asked about Orab, Sinai, they asked about this Siloa Brooks, they asked about Ionian Mount, they asked about Forbidden Tree, they asked about this a mortal taste, all these things. So you should have complete idea about the opening stanza. So your half work is done. Right. Now the book 2. What happens in book 2? As you know, Satan sitting in on his throne calls on council to decide their next move. Moloch advocates for open war while Belial favors inaction out of fear and greater suffering. So they are just deciding what to do. Right. And there is Satan sitting on his throne, asking all these councils like what should be done. Then Beelzebub, influenced by Satan, proposes they corrupt a new created world. Satan, what volunteers to explore the new world, passing through the gates of hell, guarded by sin and death. That happens in book 2. And what happens in book 3? God foresees Satan's plan to provoke the fall of mankind but emphasizes man's free will. The Son of God offers himself a ransom for humanity's salvation. And Satan, what happened? He disguised as lovely angel first, tricks Uriel into giving him direction to paradise. The book raises question about free will, predestination, and the fall of angels. Reaches the edge of paradise and setting the stage for temptation of Adam and Eve. And book fourth, what happened? Satan stands on Mount Niphates. Very important, Niphates. And reflecting on his fall, growing despair. And he sees Adam and Eve in their innocence, provoking further envy and hatred. And Satan leaps into paradise and takes the form of what? Cormorant, observing the couple. Then Uriel warns Gabriel of Satan's presence, and the angel confronts Satan, who eventually kind of, ran away from there. And Adam and Eve remain innocent, engaging in unfallen love, unaware of Satan's presence. Book 5, again, Eve wakes from a troubling dream, steered by Satan's whispered words about that disobedience, and Adam tries to. Both are disturbed by the principle. And God sends Raphael to warn Adam and Eve about Satan's treachery and then flees. Okay, and Raphael tells the story of the rebel angels and Satan's jealousy of the son. So, not much of the thing happens in all these books. You can just skip it, and our thing, happens in book 9. What happens? Milton declares that the poem now takes on a tragic mode. Satan enters to paradise disguised as serpent, plotting to tempt Eve. Eve suggests that she and Adam split up to work more efficiently despite Adam's warning. Satan tempts Eve, convincing her to eat that forbidden fruit from the tree of knowledge. Eve shares the fruit with Adam, and both realizes their sin as guilt and shame. This all we have already discussed in the plot summary. So everything happens, here in book 9. And the fall of man happens in your book 9. And Milton portrays a martial quarrel between. This was the question they have asked recently in your exam. Milton portrays a martial quarrel between Adam and Eve, where they argue about whether they should work together or separately in the garden. Remember, there when something happens in anyone's, not even poets but others, they can that can be reflected in their work, and that's exactly what is happening here in Paradise Lost book 9, that Milton's actually what portraying about the martial quarrel between Adam and Eve in book 9. Very important. And the speech, you could see what was that: why dost thou then suggest to me distrust, knowing who I am, and as I know who thou art? But let us once be true to one another, though the tempest rage outside, will weather it together. So that reflects the event. Anyway, book 10, important for you because here what happens: God sends the Son to confront Adam and Eve and deliver their sentence. Eve is condemned to pain in childbirth and Adam to hard labor. In hell, sin and death build a bridge to the mortal world, sensing Satan's victory, and Satan returns triumphantly to hell, and only for him and his followers to be turned into snakes. Anyway, Adam and Eve begins to reconcile, seeking repentance. And book 11 is important for you these days because they have asked kind of two questions from book 11. And why? I'll tell you. Anyway, the son defends Adam and Eve's remorse before God, but they must still leave paradise. God sends Michael to remove them from Eden, which causes what Adam and Eve great grief. Michael puts Eve to sleep, shows Adam the future sins and death, and Adam sees exceptions of Enoch and Noah, who are saved through their virtue. Milton does refer about Agra, Lahore of Great Mughal in book 9. That's why they're asking question based on that. Remember the line also, 389, 393 of book 11. Milton says what about India, the great empire of the world, built and established by the Persian, the Greek, the Roman, or whoever, Babylon or old Egyptian, Thebes, or yet the Persian glory, Agra, Lahore of great Mughal. Okay, so Milton is referring to these Agra, Lahore, which were part of Mughal Empire at that time. So the Mughal Empire was one of the largest and most powerful empire in the world actually, and it ruled over much of Indian subcontinent from 16th to 19th century. Book 12, what happens? You should know the last line of it. I'll tell you. They looking back, all the steam side beheld of paradise so late their happy seed, and waved over by that flaming brand, the gate with dreadful faith throned and fairy arms. Some natural tears they dropped, but wived them soon. The world was all before them, where to choose, and their place of rest, and providence their guide. They hand in hand, this line they have asked, they hand in hand with wandering steps and slow through Eden took their solitary way. So, Paradise Lost done quite much a lot, but in Paradise Regained, you should know the date only that they're asking, and about that closet drama Samson agnostic, that you should know. And remember that this is divided into 4 books, total 2065 lines. And Barbara K. Lawalski actually has labeled this particular work as brief epic. Some of plots are there, but not much of thing happened there. Remember Samson agnostic. Very important. Why? Because of the closet drama. They ask question on that. It was published together with Paradise Law Regained. Very important. This play focus on what? Samson's final phase of life. Samson is portrayed as blinded and a prisoner of Philistines. Milton, blind when writing, parallels what Samson's blindness. Eyeless in Gaza at the mill with slave. That was the question recent. describes what Samson's despair. Samson was self-pity, his old strength. He pulls down the pillar of dragon temple, sacrificing himself. Samson's death results in the destruction of Philistine's rapture. Milton combines Greek tragedy with Hebrew scripture, and he believed the Bible classical forms were superior. Very important, this tragedy was actually drawn from Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides. Pides. And Milton states of the style and uniformity they only will best judge. The work blends what Greek tragedy structure, biblical themes. Samson actually explore all these themes like strength, redemption, sacrifice. So that was all about Samson agnostic. And now I'll tell you about the poem. When I consider how my light is spent, or in short, we have on his blindness. Always you get question on that. That's why it's very important. And especially that three lines, they also serve who only stand and wait, are quoted and express his frustration and wavering faith that his blindness brought on it. So what happened in usually in any sonnet, if somebody is following Petrarchian, what happens, or Shakespearean, there will be problem in the beginning, like all the lines, and then there will be solution at the last two lines or the last four line, and that turn is called what, usually volta, as you remember that we have discussed before. So that turn happens. First he complains about his blindness to the god, and then he accepts it. So that's exactly is all about this poem, sonnet. So all the lines are important in that sonnet that you have to consider. First important line, when I consider how my light is spent before half my days in this dark world and wide, and that one talent which is death to hide. Lodged with me useless, though my soul more bent to serve therewith my Maker and present. My true account, lest he returning child, doth God exact day labor light denied. I fondly ask, now here something turn is happening, but patience to prevent that soon reply. God doth not need either man's work or his own gifts. Who best bear his mind yoke, they serve him best. His estate is kingly, thousands at his bleeding bidding speed, and post over land and ocean without rest. They serve, they also serve who only stand and wait. So I hope you understand the sonnet better. And on Shakespeare, the another sonnet was there on Shakespeare. Very important, the opening line we have. What needs my Shakespeare for his honored bones? The labor of an age is piled stones. So the question was there about Shakespeare recently, like 3 4 years ago. They asked about on Shakespeare, like who wrote it. So it was John Milton. Now you should know the first line as well, because there was question on that itself. So the labor of an age is piled stone, or that his hallowed relic should be hid under a starry point pyramid. Dear son of memory, great heir of fame, what needst thou such weak witness of thy name? Thou in our wonder and astonishment hast built thyself a livelong monument. For whilst to the shame of slow endeavouring art, thy easy numbers flow, and that each heart hath from the leaves of thy unvalued book those Delphic lines with deep impression took. Then thou, our fancy of itself beavering, dost make us marvel with too much conceiving. And so, specular, in such pomp dost lie, that kings for such tomb would wish to die. So the ending is very, you should remember. Another poem was London. Remember, it was written by Wordsworth. The line starts with Milton. by Wordsworth. Remember that. Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour. You get question always based on that. So that you have to know. And if you have time, you can just read all of it. Actually, all the lines are important that you can read. Now it's time for us to solve the questions. Whatever the question in the past 7 years, Net has asked for you, on Milton, it's here right now. So, the correct chronology order of the work. Remember, the order is what? I didn't give the answer for this. You have to find out because it's about order, right? Remember, earlier, later, middle, mostly prose, you can put. And here is what? Last is what? Samson, then regained, then lost. So even if you know this, you will be able to answer. So what it is asking here, paradise regained should be at the end, right? If there is no Samson agnostic. So B should be at the end. Then lost, we have A. So where is BA at the end? Here you could easily answer, right? Easy to answer. Then again, we have another question. What is the correct chronological sequence of British poet in order of their birth? So, as we know, we have talked about Marvel, Milton. We have a code. Remember? The code was GLC M, then social media. That is Moore and all these things, right? So through that you easily answer. To answer right now, if you know in the chat box, or you can just take this picture, screenshot, and give me the answer. Okay. And then we have question number 3, which is about who said of the blank verse, quoting an unnamed critic, that it is verse only to the eye. So something I. Adding further that has neither the easiness of prose nor the melody of numbers. So actually it was in Samuel Johnson, Essay on Poetic Theory, and especially what on Milton. So that's why it's very important. We have another question. Who among the following are the two great masters of the French language that T.S. Eliot's contrast with Dryden and Milton? So we already know that it's Racine and Baudelaire. Very easy to answer, right? We have talked about it in the beginning of the class. And there is a full, paragraph from that essay. The French writers, as you know, the great masters of language, have been more concerned with the form of language than with its content, and they have been occupied with devising rhetorical devices to convey states of mind. Rather than with the exploration of states of mind, they have been concerned not so much with expressing themselves as with expressing human nature. So the greatest of them, remember, Racine and Baudelaire, much closer affinity with the metaphysical poets like Dryden and Milton. I hope it's clear to everyone. Anyway, question number 5. Which book of Paradise Lost? What is of Adam and Eve's sexual quarrel? Remember that divorce stuff? It was in which book? Obviously in book 9. We already talked about it. Right. In short, what happens in all 12 books? First book, Satan's Rebellion. Book 2, Satan's Council of Fallen Angel. Then God's creation of the universe. Book 4, Satan tempts Eve. Gabriel's warning, Raphael's story of creation. Book 6, War in Heaven. Satan seduces Eve. Book 7, Raphael's teaching on universe creation. Book 9, Adam's request to Raphael for knowledge. Book 9, The Fall of Man. Book 10, Adam and Eve's Penance, Michael's vision on future. It was in book 11. And book 12, again, Michael shows the madam. So these two, Michael, if they ask about it, remember last two books he has appeared. And who was Milton's model when he recast the first edition in 1667? Paradise Lost in 10 books and 12 books of the second edition. So, as we know, he actually followed the model of Virgil's Aeneid. Very important that you should remember Aeneid. We already talked about it. So, see, if you have attended all the session, then these questions are like, walk kind of very easy for you. In which book of Paradise Lost does Milton refers to Agra and Lahore of great Mughals? Book 11. And there is a line that we already read. And question number 8, identify the poem term as pastoral elegy. So we are talking about elegy, pastoral. So, right, Lycidas, then Adonis, and then we have Tiresias. All easy to answer. And match list 1 with list 2. So the poetics of prose, the problem of Dostoevsky, surprised by sin, the way women also. Surprised by sin, why we have mentioned here? Because he's actually took this line, Milton, thou shouldst be living at this hour, from London's that poem, and he has mentioned there. He took the line and talked about it, surprised by sin, the reader in Paradise Lost. So that surprised by sin is actually based on the Paradise Lost, all the critical aspects of it. So anyway, the way women write by Hayat Mary. Anyway, you have to, if it is there, then you should anyway have a little bit idea about it. So question number 10, who among the following refers the high seriousness? We always get this question, right? And we also discussed in our earlier in this session itself. So it was our Matthew Arnold who said it about Chaucer. Chaucer doesn't kind of have that high seriousness, he lacks. Chaucer does not have, but who have? Homer, Shakespeare, and Milton. Question number 11, again chronology order. If you know this code, earlier, middle, and the later. So Samson, first Samson, then we have regained, then we have lost, right? In all the prose happens here, the prose start with reform, then education, then books that our Areopagitica, and then king. So all these four major tracks is in the middle. So easy. Earlier, Christ, address, Shakespeare, right? Christ, Shakespeare, 22, 23 year. We have about the castle, 23 lane, all these things. So through that you can answer. Let's see what we can do with this. So first it is asking chronological order. Hero and Leander, our Marlowe, we can just put. The last one would be our Paradise Lost. Camus, earlier than the prose. So we can just put before lost, this land first, then we have lost, then we have Lycidas, Hero and Leander would be in the earlier. So by Marlowe, we can just put this first, and through that you can easily answer. Right, very easy to remember if you know the code. So question number 12, what needs my Shakespeare for his honored bone? Tell me what on Shakespeare, right? The labor of an age is piled stone, or that his hallowed relic should be hid under a star yawning pyramid. I told you this question they ask. So John Milton. We already on Shakespeare talked about it. Anyway, Question number 13, arrange the correct chronology. Again, correct chronology. So all these seems like somewhere near. So we could just put that caller, and then we have our lost, and the through the date you can understand that will be the somewhere here, and the seeing things will be here. So you can easily answer. Question number 14, which of the following works, so seeing things, remember, is by Seamus Heaney, and which of the following works of Milton seeks to adapt the Greek tragedy? Greek tragedy, Greek theme is from Samson Agnostic. Easy to answer. Question number 15, it is talking about who has written these works of Milton. Miltons are there. So here is the answer. Milton and the English Revolution is written by Christopher Hill. Then we have next John Milton, Language, Gender, Power. Catherine. And then we have Milton by E.M.W. Tilliard. And the Milton's language is Thomas and Con. So all these you have to remember. So again, the chronology order. So mostly you are getting questions like chronology order on Milton. Again, as I told you, this, right? Then we have this, right? Then this is our first work, remember, then it is a second work, then we have less. So we can easily answer. E should be at the end, A should be above at, and then the first one should be here like C. Then after that we have Shakespeare, D, and we are left with Lycidas, P. So C, D, B, A, C. Let's check if it is there. C, D, B, A, E. Correct. So through that you can easily answer, right? So that's all, guys. We have already covered Milton. Tomorrow we're going to talk about metaphysics and Cavalier and Prose, right? So if you like the if you like this live session, you can just give a like and also leave a comment, and if possible you can share with your friends, and you can join Telegram, you can join WhatsApp, and all this stuff all are there in the description box just below the video. So thank you so much, and I'll see you tomorrow. So for now, have a good day and bye bye.